In the clash tonight, former East London schoolgirl Shamima Begum shocked Britain when she and two friends slipped out of the country to join terrorist group ISIS in Syria at aged 15. Now aged 21, Begum is currently challenging the removal of her citizenship by the government, which argues that she poses a security risk. And her plea to come back to the UK following the fall of ISIS in Syria has certainly left the nation divided. To debate this in the clash tonight, I'm joined by the retired US Ambassador Peter Galbraith, who helped free a Canadian woman from the same Syrian detention centre where Begum is held. He says she does not pose a danger to the British public as she has fully cut ties with ISIS and should be allowed home. But Dr. Alan Mendoza, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society, says Begum shouldn't be given a path back to the UK, and our primary responsibility must always be to citizens who do not betray their fellow Britons by signing up as an entity seeking to destroy it. They both join me now. Peter Galbraith, great to have you with us. Why do you think we should allow Shamima Begum back into the country after she defected to ISIS?
Look, before we turn to Shamima Begum, who seems to be quite an obsession in the United Kingdom, I think it's important to focus on all the other people who have been victims of the Islamic State. 11,000 Kurds died fighting the Islamic State. That is thousands of orphans. I brought out a number of Yazidi women, or reunited them with their children. One girl who was 15, the same age as Shamima Begum was when she went to Syria. She was kidnapped at 15. Her entire family was killed. She was sold to 6 different men. She had 2 children. And then when Barghouth fell in 2019, the Yazidi religious establishment took her children away from her. They literally took a 7-month-old girl off of her breast. And I wish that there was more attention on those 15-year-olds than just on Shamima Begum. Now, coming to Shamima, who I've met in Rouge Camp a couple of times, look, she was 15. 15-year-olds do very stupid things. She says she regrets it. She dresses like somebody who you would find in a pub in London. I suspect that's roughly where she would like to go. I completely sympathize with the idea that European governments don't want to take back all their citizens. It's hard to know. But I think, with a 15-year-old is something of a different category. And to say that she had alternate citizenship in Bangladesh when the foreign minister of Bangladesh said she would be hanged if she went to Bangladesh is not a real alternative. And I find that also a peculiar position from a country that won't send people to the United States, which is a robust democracy, perhaps even after our Trump years, still of a higher standard than Bangladesh, because some states have a death penalty. So I just find the treatment of her to be unwarranted, and I find the obsession with her as opposed to, these Yazidi girls who were kidnapped in 2014, and nobody paid any attention to their plight. Even for 2 years, they were trying to get their children back. I find it a bit much.
Alan Mendoza, how do you respond to that? Have we just become obsessed with Shamima Begum?
Well, it's quite right for us to be obsessed with British citizens or former British citizens who go and join a terrorist state trying to destroy our country. It's entirely right to be obsessed with it. And, I take Ambassador Galbraith's point absolutely about the need to look at real victims, in my view, of what happened with ISIS. But Shamima Begum is not one of them. Yes, she was 15. The 15-year-olds know what is wrong and right, what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing. They may make mistakes, it's true, but they know the magnitude of things at 15. It's just incorrect to assume that they're an 8-year-old in terms of their mental approach here. Equally, here's someone who, when she became an adult, was happy to still affiliate to ISIS. She remains married to somebody a fighter for ISIS. There's been no attempt to end that marriage on her part. No attempt to say, oh, I'm past that, gone. She has put on a lovely show for the media recently, putting on wonderful Western clothes, saying, she follows music of this, that, and the other. But in the most recent interview I saw 3 weeks ago, she was quite adamant that she didn't need rehabilitation. Now, we know that people who have gone through radicalization absolutely do need rehabilitation and do need de-radicalization if they're allowed back here. All of this should put tremendous warning signs up, red flags. And let's not forget, Dan, we've just had the case of Usman Khan come up in the news again, the man who was supposedly rehabilitated. He'd convinced everyone what a marvelous fellow he was and how he was reintegrated into British society, did not believe in radical Islam anymore. And what happens the minute he gets a chance? He goes and stabs people. And I'm not for a moment suggesting Shamima Begum might return and stab people, but can we be sure she's been de-radicalized? Why take the chance? It seems madness to me.
So, Peter Galbraith, you've obviously met this woman. Do you think that she could be putting on a show? And why does she still remain married to this man? That's a good point, isn't it?
Well, unless you wish to recognize marriages conducted by the Islamic State, which I certainly never would, I'm not sure she was married to anybody. And she certainly has no feelings toward any man. In fact, she discusses the men of the Islamic State in a rather humorous and condemning manner. I think she would be quite happy to be meeting the kind of men you might meet in a pub in London.
But isn't the argument, Peter, though, of course she feels that now. Of course she feels that now because her dreams of becoming a successful ISIS bride went up in smoke. Literally, the life was horrific. But do you not understand why people in the UK feel that Shamima Begum needs to be an example to other young potential terrorists thinking of leaving the UK? No, you know, there's no way back. Don't go because there's no way back.
You lock up, you folks in Britain, you don't have the same kind of laws we have in the United States. You don't lock up people who commit violent offenses for life. I mean, and there's no evidence that Shamima Begum committed any violent offense. She went and joined a terrorist organization. She should be prosecuted for that. Incidentally, you know, the other Bangladeshi women who were British-born women of Bangladeshi origin who happened to be over 21, they haven't lost their citizenship. So this one 15-year-old girl has been picked on. She did a stupid thing. She joined a terrorist organization. I just, my opinion is that she's not a great threat. She's hardly the most deserving person, as I said right at the beginning, to come from the Islamic State. And I really do think Britons might focus. I know it's with Brexit, it's become very insular, but it might focus on the people who actually fought the Islamic State, the Syrian Kurds. And the 11,000 dead. It might focus on the people who have been displaced by Turkey. It might focus on these Yazidi girls who were kidnapped, sold, raped, and then had their children taken away from them. Those Kurds who fought the Islamic State, they really were fighting to keep terrorists out of Britain. And of course, now they're stuck with all these people, and the attitude is, well, better you than me.
Well, I don't think it's fair to do down Britain in that way.
To try to help solve their problem. And this particular case, unless you feel that all 15-year-olds who commit crimes, even if they haven't actually committed any act of violence, should be locked up for life, okay. But that isn't really how Britain does things.
Well, no, but I think to say that we're some sort of little Britain because of Brexit and we don't care about the big humanitarian issues facing the world is completely wrong, is it not, Alan Mendoza? That's not a fair characterisation of British foreign policy or the thoughts and feelings of the British people.
No, of course not. No, and I think it's a strange comment to make on that score. I understand, there are a lot of anger about people about Brexit thinking this thing, suggests insular behaviour. On the contrary, as we've seen just in the last couple of weeks, it doesn't suggest anything insular. Britain continues to play a global role. You saw that with the decision to send one of our warships sailing right by the Russian Tiger. And we saw what happened there as a result. That's not the actions of a small nation. That's an action of a nation that wants to be out there, wants to be setting the global agenda. And certainly I take the point that we should be very concerned about those who are the victims of ISIS. But I have to say, I don't believe Shamima Begum was one of them. I do think it'll be great for us to look more into rehabilitation, into the genuine victims, and to see that. But the idea that somehow Britain is obsessing about Brexit and is insular, and that's why we're obsessed with this case, just isn't true. We're obsessed with this case because we do believe it represents a security threat to this country, and we've got graphic evidence, just again, dredged up again, of what can happen when things go wrong. What happens if she comes back? It turns out she has a Damascene conversion the second time in a year's time and becomes once again a radical leader for, bringing other young women into the folds of radical Islam in this kind of way. There's nothing to suggest that she won't do that. I take, Ambassador Galbraith has met her. He thinks she's lovely. But again, you need a long program to work out exactly what's going on in the mind of someone like this. And let's not forget, her citizenship has already been stripped from her. It was a brave decision made by Sajid Javid at the time. As Home Secretary, he was told he would be defeated in the courts for doing it. He went ahead with it anyway, and so far, of course, the courts have agreed that there's nothing wrong with what he's done. So I think it's appropriate to look at the security dimension here, to look at the character. And again, a reminder that while she may have gone as a 15-year-old, she was still professing her support for ISIS, even when it was obvious that ISIS was finished. And it's only very, very recently that she's changed her tune. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if she had been coached into doing that. We've seen it before, and I'm sure we'll see it again.
Indeed. Peter Galbraith, the final word to you. What would you say to the parents of the victims of the Manchester Arena bombing, for example, which was carried out by ISIS fighters, who say, look, we can't support any person that defected to ISIS?
Well, I would, of course, I do express sympathy for them, to them. And I do understand why European countries don't want to take back their citizens. It's very hard to know who is who. So I'm not actually advocating generally taking back. I'm just suggesting that there are cases of people who have repudiated the Islamic State. The Canadian woman that I brought out is a case in point. Somebody who also was very cooperative with U.S. law enforcement. But secondly, that in the case of juveniles, one applies a different standard. If you've had a juvenile who used a knife on somebody at age 50 or 15 and threatened her, you don't say, how will you know that this person will never be rehabilitated? In fact, you may incarcerate them for a period of time, and then you make a judgment, but you can never be entirely sure. And again, this is a person who, to the best of my knowledge, and I don't think anybody has evidence otherwise, never herself engaged in a violent act.
Okay. Thank you so much. Fascinating thoughts. That is the retired US Ambassador Peter Galbraith, who has spent time with Shamima Begum, and Dr. Alan Mendoza, before that, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. A fascinating clash tonight.